we're looking ahead with a lot of excitement to celebrating Sustainable Tucson's 20th anniversary in 2026. This evening's webinar is a precursor to one of the key events of that 20th celebration, with the Investing in People and Infrastructure Summit in March. Our moderator this evening is Stuart Moody, who will tell us more about the summit and tonight's program. We're scheduled to close at 7:15 after any brief announcements. So, take it away, Stuart. And unmute.
Yeah, thank you, Paula. And I'm really delighted to introduce this evening's webinar. This is a precursor to one of the key events of our 20th anniversary celebration next year, a summit called Investing in People and Infrastructure. The summit, hosted by Pima College, their Applied Technology Division, will bring together experts, leaders, such as those we have here tonight, and students representing diverse constituencies for the shared purpose of envisioning and planning a more robust, localized, and prosperous economy in this region. This economy will renew Tucson by improving energy productivity while decreasing energy usage, by improving resource productivity while reducing waste and toxic byproducts, and supporting a skilled workforce that makes these gains possible at a living wage. For tonight's program, we'll open with a big picture overview from Ed Maibach. Ed will be followed by remarks from three discussants. I've seen one or two of them so far. They'll be introduced at their time of comment. I'm happy to invite Skip Leitner, energy economist, to introduce Ed. Skip is a prolific thinker and writer in this field. Starting as a member of the Naders Raiders force, Skip went on to form alliances with energy conservation labor groups in the Midwest. His recent accomplishments include contributing to programs and budget articulation for the 2021 Infrastructure Act and the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act. So he knows how to think big. In light of the current disregard for energy conservation, climate protection, and air quality at the national level, Skip has joined us to build a constituency for continued progress at the regional level. Thank you, Skip, for your vision and leadership.
Wow, well, thank you, Stuart. I'm delighted to be here, and I couldn't be more pleased to introduce Ed Maibach. I've known of his work for many, many years. Ed and I have iterated lightly by email, and I think we've even been at a couple of conferences together over the last bunch of years. But through a serendipitous link in the past bunch of months, we've gotten much more interactive. I first met Ed when he was a co-author of a book chapter. My colleague, Dr. Karen Earhart Martinez, and I did called People-Centered Initiatives for Increasing Energy Savings in 2010. And Ed did a really good job with some of his colleagues, not only at George Mason University, but also Yale and American University, talking about global warming's 6 Americas, but not so much focusing on the differences of the different consumer groups or action groups, but as the sharing of common values. He noted that, yeah, we've got the alarmed and the concerned of America's 6 global warming, 6 America, compared to the doubtful and dismissive, but really interesting, all 6 Americas value energy savings. And he's gone on to focus on what I think is an illuminating public engagement for both public health and climate change strategies. So he contributed that book in 2010, chapter to our book in 2010. But as I said, a serendipitous reconnection. I've really been thinking through and reading some of his work more recently, and delighted to connect as he'll give some opening thoughts on the idea of engaging in both public health and climate change. As you heard from there, you saw from the introduction emails, as distinct emeritus professor at George Mason, founder of the Center for Climate Change and Communication. And I knew that that was a big topic I'd love to see. And so after Ed's opening 10 or 12 minutes of thoughts to induce conversation, I'm delighted to introduce 3 local Tucsonans, prominent Tucsonans, if I might, Matt McDonnell with Current Energy, a consultant firm across the U.S., but also uh, Julie Hendricks with Jones Lang LaSalle, but also collaborates with the U.S. Green Building Council. And then uh, Jess Janecek, who's the Dean of Students and School Culture here at Tucson City High, to offer some further conversation thoughts as we might engage in an ongoing review of how communication science can really harness some positive outcomes over time. But as Ed was saying earlier, action and action does speak louder than words. So with that, Ed, delighted, delighted this bit of serendipity has brought us together again, and I'll let you take the high road and begin talking.
Sounds great, Skip. Thanks, Skip, Stuart, Paula. Thank you so much for the work you're doing. I love the fact that you're going to be celebrating your 20th anniversary. That is so great. Perhaps I could come out and join you for the anniversary party because that would be a lot of fun. As a matter of fact, I know about Sustainable Tucson because I have two of my beloved sons who are residents of Tucson. So they are beneficiaries of your great work, and just can't tell you how pleased I am to know about it. I am first, foremost, and always a public health professional. I'm probably not going to talk too much about that tonight, except to sort of cue up the two insights that I want to share with you tonight. They really come not exclusively from my work on climate change, but really more from the 30 some years of work I did in public health before 18 years ago. I started to work on climate change. And I am a communication scientist by training. My doctoral degree is in communication science. My master's is in public health, but I also have an undergraduate degree in psychology. So I'm a card-carrying communication scientist as well as a card-carrying behavioral psychologist. So, and the two insights that I want to offer up, one is from communication and one is from behavior change psychology. And the reason I want to offer these two up is because often the people that I work with conflate the two challenges. The challenge of winning hearts and minds, or in other words, getting the communication right, is often conflated with the challenge of helping people or organizations change their behavior once they decide it's in their best interest to do so. In other words, once we've won their hearts and minds. Um, Both of these insights are written up in the form of heuristics or guidelines in a chapter that I shared with Skip, and I believe he's shared with all of you. And if he hasn't, I know he will. But I'm just going to tee them up tonight. They're fairly simple. I know that we're going to be able to use them in the conversation for the rest of the hour. Um, and they are simple by design. They're simple because if you want your ideas, your insights to be used, you would be wise to make them simple, which is the perfect way to tee up the guideline for getting the communication right, for winning hearts and minds. And that guideline, mind you, it is an evidence-based guideline. There is a ton of social science research from the fields of communication, sociology, psychology, anthropology, and beyond to support this guideline. And the guideline is incredibly simple, and that is public communication campaigns that succeed always have the same three qualities: simple, clear messages, repeated often by a variety of trusted and caring voices. Each of those three components are absolutely necessary. One of them, the message repetition, is the most important because it's the one that we typically fail to achieve, but all three of them are necessary. The topics that we communicate in Sustainable Tucson, the topics that you communicate aren't simple. There's, climate change, sustainability, the planetary health boundaries, even frankly, community-based recycling. None of that is simple. There's a lot of complexity to it, a lot of a lot of nuance, but if we want to be successful in sharing what we know and in trying to motivate people to care, we have no choice but to find ways of taking that nuance, taking that complexity, and rendering it simple, rendering it into a very small set of simple, clear messages that will help members of our target audience simplify appropriately. Our goal in communication isn't to send people to graduate school, because if they wanted to go to graduate school, they would. Most people don't. And so if we want them to understand what people who have gone to graduate school, who have become experts in a topic, understand, we have no choice but to take the complexity and make it simple. Boil it down into simple, clear messages. Ideally, simple, clear messages that tell a compelling narrative, tell a compelling story about the fact that we have a problem. The problem is personal enough that personal to me, I care. It's probably personal to you. Once I share with you, you may well care. And there are things we can do to address our problem. There are actions. There are those of us who are taking actions to address the problem, and we will be more successful in addressing the problem if you join with us. That is fundamentally the notion of a simple, clear, compelling narrative that invites people in. But if we don't achieve the second element of simple, clear messages repeated often, then the message repetition element, we can't expect it to work. While everything that we are ethically obligated to talk about, all of our simple, clear messages must be based in the truth. Not everybody feels that ethical obligation, but I know that all of us in this conversation do. The things we say must be based in the truth. Um, and uh, and those of us who are trained as truth tellers, not just scientists, but certainly scientists and health professionals and many others, engineers, we are teachers, we are trained as truth tellers. We are also trained basically to be a little bit I'll say impatient. We don't like to repeat ourselves. We like to make a case once, think that we've gotten the job done, and move on, whether that's to move on to make another case or to move on to a different audience to make the case yet again. But what we don't like to do is say it over and over and over again. But any politician, whether that is the candidate who's trying to earn your vote for the Tucson City Council, or the candidate who's trying to earn your vote for the next presidency of the United States, any politician knows that message repetition is the lingua franca of what they do. It is absolutely required. You say it over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, and by the time you're absolutely sick of saying it again, that's when your audience is starting to hear it for the first time. But there are ways in which we don't always have to be the ones who say it. The beauty of simplifying our messages is that they become more likely to be repeated by other people, other trusted validators, other trusted and caring voices in the lives of the people that we're trying to share what we know with. So again, the two components, the simple, clear messages and the message repetition, are mutually reinforcing, because the better job we do at simplifying, the more likely other people are to become carriers of our message. And then finally, the third and final component, that the trusted and caring voices. Allow me to say the obvious. Trust and caring is in the eye of the beholder, right? We know that to be true. We look at America, we look at Tucson, we look at Arizona, we look at America today, and we see communities divided, communities that have totally different opinions about who they see as trusted and caring about them. But that is part of our challenge, and that is part of our opportunity as sustainability communicators. We might not be the most trusted. When I have my health professional hat on, I know that I am actually highly trusted. Me and my colleagues are highly trusted. But climate scientists, for example, when I have my climate science hat on, I am not necessarily trusted. I'm like a foreign entity. Nobody knows a climate scientist. They don't know what climate scientists do, and they don't have any particular reason to trust us. So when we are not necessarily seen as trusted and caring, it's contingent upon us to go out and find the people who are seen as trusted and caring and invite them to use their trusted, caring voices in being carriers or amplifiers of our simple, clear messages. If you look at Donald Trump, Donald Trump is a master of this formula. Simple, clear messages repeated often by a variety of trusted and caring voices. Um, I don't see Donald Trump as trustworthy or caring about anybody other than himself, but there are plenty of our brothers and sisters around America who differ with me on that point. While it's not every day that I praise Donald Trump. I'm willing to praise him every day as a highly effective communicator who has legions of people who are also seen as trusted and caring, who repeat his simple, clear messages. And that's why he has been so very effective. And that's the fundamental essence, the evidence-based approach whereby we who are working on sustainability, be it in Tucson, be it in Arizona, be it in my hometown of Potomac, Maryland, or where I work in Virginia, this is the formula for winning hearts and minds. Okay, so that's the first point I wanted to share. The second point I wanted to share is if we win hearts and minds, or after we have won hearts and minds, we still have the hard part of the work to yet left undone. Think about your last year's New Year's resolution. Show of hands, how many of you succeeded? I can't see you all, but I'm pretty much sure nobody's hand is up. It is, and it's just human truth that we can know things are good for us or good for our family or our community, and we can even resolve to start doing those things. And at least 9 times out of 10, we won't. And there are reasons why we won't, and behavior change psychologists have studied those reasons. And the insights of that research are incredibly helpful, incredibly instructive to us if we are looking to go beyond winning hearts and minds and actually getting people to take the actions that will make a difference. And when I say take the actions that will make a difference, that does include personal actions. My wife and I have completely decarbonized our home and our local transportation, and we are super pumped up about that. It took a long time and a lot of effort, but we did it. But changing, getting people to take the actions that make a difference can also include your city councilors, people who people who you would like to see adopt model public policy in Tucson that will help it make it easier for everyone in Tucson to live more sustainably. If I could only do outreach to one of those two groups, the people of Tucson or the city council, I'd put my effort into the city council. But it isn't mutually exclusive. As a matter of fact, it's mutually reinforcing. The more the voters in Tucson support the kinds of proposals that you would like to see the city council take, the more likely it is that you will be effective at helping city councilmen and women take those actions in the form of passing bills that will improve the sustainable capacity of Tucson. So, what are the three insights we know about actually how to help people, policymakers, and organizations follow through once we've convinced them that it's in their best interest to do so? I boil it down to 3 words: make the behavior easy, fun, and popular. What do I mean by easy? It's hard to do things differently than we've done in the past. The best predictor of what we're going to do tomorrow is what we did today. The best predictor of what we did today is what we did yesterday. And the best predictor of what we did yesterday is what we did the day before, because we know how to do those things. We have ingrained them in our habits. They take no cognitive or emotional effort for us to continue doing those things. Conversely, when we expect people to change their behavior, whether they are people in their personal capacity at home or their professional capacity at work. When we're asking them to do something different, it takes cognitive effort, it takes emotional effort, and it takes persistence. So everything we can do to make it easy to adopt the new behavior will make it more likely that they will do so. Psychologists say that I was so blessed to have Albert Bandura, psychologist from Stanford University, now deceased, as a member of my dissertation committee. Albert Bandura taught us that the single best predictor of what people will do is what he called their self-efficacy, their belief in their ability to perform the behavior under the situations in which they want to perform the behavior. And there are so many barriers that make behaviors difficult and undermine people's self-efficacy, their belief in their ability to succeed with the behavior. And that is almost always why none of us have succeeded with regularly succeed with our resolutions. You know, if my resolution was I'm going to start exercising 7 days a week, it's the reason why I don't is probably because I lack belief in my ability to manage my time, my emotions, my motivation successfully to get out there 7 days a week. So to make it easy, we can model the behavior. We can show people other people like them who are performing the behavior. We can actually find out what are the barriers that are holding them back. I won't have time to talk about it tonight, but I've done a lot of work with America's TV weathercasters. I wanted them to become local climate reporters, people who could translate global climate change into local impacts in Tucson and in Washington, D.C. And I learned that most of them wanted to do it, but none of them were. So I built a climate reporting resources program that made it easy, or if not easy, at least easier for them to do this work. And it was absolutely transformative. Once we had built the resource program for them and did a little bit of fundamental rudimentary training on how to use these resources, we have literally increased their reporting on climate change 1,200-fold. It's absolutely amazing. So that make it easy. That's one of the secrets to helping people change. Make it fun. And what the heck do I mean by that? What I mean by that is the things that motivate us to recommend behaviors, we see the benefits, otherwise we wouldn't be recommending them. But the people that we're trying to bring into this endeavor with us, they may see entirely different benefits from performing these actions than we do. And we would be wise to understand the benefits that they see from our recommended actions and highlight those rather than highlight the benefits that we see. I have learned this over and over again in my life as a public health professional. You can never anticipate what your target audience will see as the most compelling reasons to take an action until you've talked to them about it and you've asked them, and they will tell you. And once they tell you, I am wise to actually make that the focus of the case that I'm making. Here's what you can do. Here's how it can be made easily incorporated into your life or your profession. And here are the benefits that you will enjoy as a result of doing these things. In the case of TV weathercasters, one of the benefits was they wanted actually recognize, the early ones at least, wanted some recognition for being brave enough to talk to their community about climate change. And so we found ways of shining a light on these groundbreaking weathercasters who were going first. And that was such a mutually reinforcing benefit that they enjoyed and brought lots more people in, lots more weathercasters into the program. So make it easy, make it fun, i.e., find the benefits they care about and highlight those. And then thirdly and finally, make it popular. The more behaviors become popular, the more people understand a behavior is socially normative, the more likely they are to feel a gravitational pull toward that behavior because they don't want to be left behind. And when a behavior is not at all popular, you can't make the case that it's popular because people will know that's a lie. And we don't lie. We're ethically obligated to tell the truth. But what we can do is we can actually shine a light on the few people who who are already performing the recommended action and the benefits that they are enjoying from doing so. So again, coming back to my work with TV weathercasters, we started there are 2,300 weathercasters in America. We started with a single one in Columbia, South Carolina, and we started with him because Columbia is a tough place to talk about climate change. We had volunteers, a volunteer in Denver and another volunteer in Detroit, but we didn't want to work with those guys because those are easier places to talk about climate change publicly. We started with a tough place and really worked hard to help him, and then we shined a light on all of the good things, all of the benefits, all of the fun that he was enjoying as a result of doing something hard, including the fact that his news station went from third in the Nielsen ratings to first in the Nielsen ratings over the first 2 years that we worked with him, which, trust me, as a local TV journalist, the most important thing you can do is bring new viewers into your station. And he did that in spades. So make it easy, make it fun, make it popular. When it's not popular, shine a light on the what do they call them? There's a jargonistic term that's absolutely hysterical, but I'm blocking it. It's 8:30 here, past my bedtime. But basically, shine a light on people who are early adopters and show how well it's working out for them. As a behavior becomes more popular, shine a light on the fact, the truth that more and more people are doing this thing. Simply telling people, there's really good research on this, simply telling people that more and more people are doing this thing will bring more and more people to think about and answer the question, well, should I be doing that thing too? And the answer is yes, it's very effective. And once the behavior actually becomes normative, it becomes the norm, more than half of the community is doing it, that is your best calling card. You absolutely want to make sure that you're communicating that early and often because it brings the rest of the folks with you. So those were the 2 points I wanted to make. Winning hearts and minds is one set of activities. Helping people actually succeed in changing their behavior is a different set of activities. They work well together, but unless we understand they are distinct and they require us to do different things, we are often going to conflate them and get neither done very well. So with that, I guess, Stuart, I'm passing it back to you.
Thank you, Ed. That's the most wonderful 10 minutes I've ever heard. And we'd like to now turn to our discussants. Our first discussant will be Matt McDonnell. He's an energy transition leader and a regulatory innovation expert with a group called Current Energy. He will provide some insights on how sustainable energy utilities can provide a climate lift. And if you want to, Matt, if you want to connect that to those 2 points that Ed talked about, all the better, but we would love just to hear what you've got to say. And we're asking this to be just 3 to 5 minutes because we've got a lot of folks here who'd like to join in the conversation.
Great. Thank you so much, Stuart, and pleasure to be a part of this discussant panel and in this conversation with Sustainable Tucson. Stuart, as you mentioned, my name is Matt McDonnell, managing partner at Current Energy Group. In terms of my day job, what I often do is work on energy transition sort of across the state regulatory landscape with utility commissions, consumer advocates, and the like. And one thing that we see across the country is that regulators and the general public, when it comes to their regulated utilities, namely gas and electric, we're all being faced with a real wicked problem, as I would describe it, that is comprised of 3 primary components. One, an increasing rising costs really across the board that is driving and emerging and really actually it's here and only increasing in terms of an affordability crisis. Rate increases have only just really started to cascade across states coast to coast, and based on investments that are already planned and forecasts that are driving additional investments, these rates are only going to increase, right? And we have a real cost containment issue. So that's pillar 1. Pillar 2 has to do with resilience, right? Reliability. We're here talking about issues related to climate. Climate is clearly driving an increased, frequency of extreme weather events. This is disrupting reliability and also harming safety and well-being of the populations that are served by our entities and utilities. The third pillar here is with respect to the addressing this amazing load growth that we're seeing pop up really across the country. It's being primarily driven by large data centers, but not entirely, but primarily through data center load growth, right? I think, part of what my team and I do is we scrutinize some of these load forecasts. I think there's a lot of uncertainty as to how real a lot of this load is and whether it will actually show up in the future. But utilities across the country are certainly taking this interest from large data centers, hyperscalers, and the like, and putting that in front of their regulators to say we need to invest in, 10, 13x, what we expected we'd have to invest in. Again, feeding back into that first pillar that I spoke to with respect to affordability. So these are the types of conversations I have with regulators, other stakeholders across the country. And what I'm hoping to talk to you all about today is one opportunity for local communities and local municipalities to start to lean in a bit more and embrace what I've long pointed out is some untapped potential and power to sort of own and have more agency over the community's sort of energy affordability and resilience portfolio when it comes to, in particular, electricity in this case. So I offer to you and I submit this concept known as a sustainable energy utility. And to describe what this is very simply, it's not a utility in a traditional sense, where it's a regulated entity that's sort of, using poles and wires to transmit electricity to an end user, right? What a sustainable energy utility essentially is, it's a public purpose entity. It's usually either city chartered or it's a nonprofit or some sort of quasi-public entity. And its sole purpose is to serve the community in which it resides. It can do that through a number of different means, usually bringing in sort of revenue bonds or other financing mechanisms that sort of leverage the power of the municipality in which it resides, and extends things like energy efficiency services, but also increasingly things like distributed energy resources, so rooftop solar, distributed batteries. It can also be expanded to include things like resilience hubs embedded in communities so that when power does go out in a hot Tucson summer, that disadvantaged and vulnerable communities have a place to go to be safe, to be in community, to make sure that we're not experiencing, increased deaths during heat waves due to power outages and the like, right? And so, we've seen increasingly communities across the country embrace these types of models where we can leverage community impact and really take more agency in addressing that local community's climate goals, increase resilience, and start to enable the community to take more democratized approach to the energy system, take more control over energy bills to address affordability, and to really help the community overall reach its climate targets, right? So we've seen one prominent example that I'll point to for sort of further reading and research comes to us from Ann Arbor, Michigan. And my former colleagues at Strategy and Consulting sort of helped with some of the early feasibility studies in Ann Arbor and allowed them to continue down the path where voters eventually approved a city chartered sustainable energy utility that is allowing them to leverage the power of public funds to finance and deploy energy resources across their community in support of climate and resilience goals. And I just offer this as a context and an opportunity for folks within the Tucson community to think about if there's opportunities for similar agency and leaning into how we might also tackle that wicked problem in those three pillars I described. So with that, I'll pause and allow other discussions to continue. Sorry if I took too long there.
Thank you, Matt. That's great stuff. And we'll come back to it, I'm sure. One question that you might ponder is, where do you see yourself or your ideas leveraging those three principles any of those principles that Ed brought out? But let's hear
Yeah.
first from Julie, and then after her, Jessica. Julie Hendricks is a sustainability architect. She's gotten awards for that. She is also the Senior Building Standards Manager with Jones Lang LaSalle. And she talks about, among other things, taboo terminology, words we need not say if we want to be effective communicators. So, Julie, please.
All right. Thank you, Stuart. So, as you said, I'm Julie Hendricks. I'm an architect and a sustainability consultant. And I, as you said, work at a very large real estate company, Jones Lang LaSalle. And I have spent the last few decades attempting to persuade building owners to build green buildings and to incorporate sustainability strategies into their buildings. And that experience has gotten me really interested in what it takes to persuade people. And I have given, a number of presentations on this topic. I feel like I've learned a few things. Some of those things that I'm about to communicate definitely have some overlap with the things that Ed said. Luckily, I learned from him that repetition is good. So that said, what's taboo terminology? So I'm a sustainability consultant, and sustainability is in my title. And there are words that I need to use to talk about my work. Obviously, sustainability is one of them. Green energy, renewable energy, sometimes diversity, sometimes climate change. And there are certain audiences where those words just are not going to win me any friends, and they really might put my potential clients on edge. And so that's what taboo terminology was about. So if you can't say sustainability or LEED or green building or diversity or climate change, what can you say? What should you say? So I presented on this at the Green Build Conference, which is the U.S. Green Building Council annual national conference last month. And what we did was, so most of it was a fun interactive presentation where we played this game called Taboo Terminology. Basically, it's the table game Taboo, except you are trying to guess the term that somebody has, and you're not allowed to say the most basic words that are associated with it. It was so fun. I've never seen people having more fun at a conference than playing this. So I'm really sad that we can't do that with you tonight, but if there's a live event where that's ever possible, would love to do that. So for my background, before we started this, we were talking about what are the ways that you need to talk to clients when you can't say the things you used to say. And so to start with, there's some overarching concepts that resonate with almost anyone. And if you don't know who your audience is, you can always go back to these concepts as a way of explaining things you want to talk about. So the first one is related to money or financial security. No matter who you're talking to, they care about this. You can use language around that. Second one, health. As Ed earlier talked about, that resonates with just about everyone, is important to just about everyone. Third, operational stability, like your ability to continue living in a secured, safe place that has continuity. And then finally, community resilience, the strength of your community. Almost everyone cares about things. Bless you. And so while those are universal themes that you could use with almost anyone, so much better than that is actually learning what your audience cares about and responding to that. So I feel like the main thing that I've learned in talking to clients over all these years is that I have to learn to listen to them, learn to listen to the language that they use and the concepts that they bring up. So there's some pretty simple tools you can use to try to draw people out when you're trying to learn what they care about. And, I would recommend doing that before you start saying what you want to say. Learn about them and ask open-ended questions. So an open-ended question is any question that you can't answer with yes or no or with a single word. If it's your client, you can ask them what do you care about? What do you hope to achieve? What worries you? What keeps you up at night? If you ask them and then really listen, then the words that they tell you will tell you how you should respond. So if you hear them talking about financial concerns, you can certainly put your argument into financial terms, and that's almost always successful. Are they concerned about loss? That is a great way of framing things that might be related to climate change. Um, are they concerned about keeping up with the Joneses or keeping up appearances? Almost everyone is. That is another way that you can frame your argument. And when you listen for the language that they're using, you can echo some of it back to them. That will make them feel more at home. And maybe I shortened this too much, but that is kind of the 2-minute version of my presentation. So I'm done. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you, Julie. That is a very important lesson we all are still learning how to put into action, to be a good active listener. And we've got Jessica Janecek now, the Dean of Students and School Culture at City High. She actually studied with Skip Leitner when she was at the University of Arizona. She'd like to talk about how we might encourage students to become more involved with these critical issues. Thank you, Jess.
Yes, thank you. I know I was like, what am I doing here? So I was a student of Skip's as I was doing my master's in public policy. I was an educator for a decade and then decided that I wanted to go and work more upstream in things. And then while working in the more upstream things, the world did shift a little bit, and it felt like working in the immediate back at schools, working directly with young people was actually what I needed to be doing. So now I'm back at school, but now in an administrative capacity. And so in preparing for this, right, going back to active listening, right, making sure that you are going and finding out, what it is that people actually care about. I just went and asked all the students. I was like, I got to go present at a thing. What do you want me to tell them? And so here's my little overview of what they think you guys should know. So the big thing that I heard over and over again, in speaking with students is that they feel really exhausted by hearing about problems, meaning that like they've grown up their whole life being focused on climate change, right? And so they hear about the problems. They know that the desert is getting hotter. They know that like water is an issue. They know about all of these things. But so what they really want to focus on is what can they actually do about it? They are very solution focused. Right. Again, they've had just like this parade of crises, and now they're like, okay, we don't need any more doom. Help us with the agency. Help us figure out what we can actually do now. So a couple things that they have that they think would be beneficial. First is to make it really personal for them, right? If you can help the students or help young people, right, see how an issue connects directly to their own lives, then they can start to think about it globally, right? So they talked about being able to see an event or an issue directly that they've experienced, right? Maybe it was a massive monsoon flood, or a really crazy hot day in December, right? Those are the types of things that they can tangibly experience and then be able to bridge it to a more like systemic, how is it actually impacting globally? And when doing so, a big thing that they also really want is don't dumb it down. They want the real tools. They want the real data. They want to they want to use modeling software. They want to be able to visualize, the increasing heat days of our city, and how that might impact the infrastructure and public health. Right? They talk about how when they do go to public meetings or that when they do get engaged and influence that or getting involved, that oftentimes that they feel like oftentimes that people are dumbing things down or feeling like they're kind of being talked down to in some way. And they're like, listen, I get it, we're kids, but we showed up. Right? If we've already gone that far, like treat us like we belong here. And the other thing that they really talked about was that like they want to be able to use that science and that data and all of those things in order to help them not just think about solutions, but then also communicate. Make sure I get all my notes in here. So again, right, thinking about all the time, thinking about their actionable solutions. So they want those things in two levels. So they want one, what am I going to do right now, right? Like you've defined this problem for me, or I've experienced this issue, right? They really, really want to be like, okay, now I'm all like jazzed up. Now, what am I going to go do with it? Right. Even one of the teachers was talking to me about how, like, even just going out and protesting or holding out signs or going to a meeting, just even that little bit of just like showing up, how much that really impacted their students and how they viewed their own level of agency. So, right, like getting them to participate in rainwater harvesting projects, right? Starting compost programs, learning more about advocating for cool pavement initiatives, just like all of these different things. The second thing, though, that they also want, that I heard a lot about is like, okay, now big picture. What are the emerging technologies? What are the careers that don't even yet exist, right? What are the other technology? What are the other things that they can really be thinking about and learning about? And how can they be setting themselves up for these very future focused solutions? They really are like, that was a big thing. They were like, we've got so many different types of energy that we haven't even thought about yet. Like, and yet we're still using coal. Like, just it blows their minds because they are always thinking like they live in this future centered world, and they oftentimes feel like a lot of the communication is still very like focused on backwards thinking. And that was even something they spoke to me about when they're like, people, they want to talk about like, okay, well, how do you like reduce driving? And they're like, why are we even talking about driving? Like, why are we not totally shifting the conversation to something that is completely different? Because we're not going to get ourselves out of this, like, our climate mess by just like these little tweaks. So let's think big. Um, and then the last thing, they really are like, give me the seat at the actual table, right? They are explicitly asking for platforms to speak with decision makers. Again, not to be patronized, but to be heard. Right? They have a lot to say. They really do. And a lot of it is well researched too. So we encourage our students to do this, and a lot of them take it on. But just finding more opportunities to get them in the rooms where decisions are happening. Yeah, because like again, these students were really, really eager to share their thoughts. Right, they went over class time in each of the classes I stepped into to have this conversation with them. They really want to be agents of change. They want to be part of finding and implementing solutions. And again, overall, right, hearing about the problems they feel like can become exhausting. It can get them depressed. It can make them hopeless. And so really all that communication that they really want is like, how do we be focused on identifying a problem, right? So it's not ignoring that there are problems, but then really brainstorming solutions, having that immediate direct impact, and then thinking even then, how do they become part of a bigger part of the solution? That's all I got.
Thank you, Jess. You really brought us back to the very beginning. Ed was saying, what is the antidote to depression, to anxiety? And it is action. And of course, that's folded in with a whole lot of rest, I would hasten to say. But when we're awake, when we are standing, sitting, walking, we can be doing something for the issue. And their energy is contagious through you. You transmitted a lot of energy, and I saw a lot of smiles and nods. So I'd like to open this up to folks who have been listening, I know, with rapt ears, but now it's a chance for you to ask a question or a brief comment. I will say, please, if you have a comment, think of brevity, or as they say in the Community Center for Dialogue and Mediation, be lean of speech. There are a lot of people in the room, and let's give everyone a chance to share either their wise thought or their probing question. So, looking for hands. You can put something in the chat if you'd like. Bruce.
Um, well, Stuart, I put a couple of things in the chat, and I appreciate the response, particularly from Matt, about something we've talked about very briefly in one of our climate groups in town, but that's the Ann Arbor example of the sustainable energy utility. And I think many people haven't heard about that. And I suppose that the first question would be for Ed, and that is, and also maybe for Julie too, does trying to talk to people about a sustainable energy utility meet the Ed tripartite analysis of good words or non-taboo terminology or not?
I'm thinking that Julie would be a better a better guide on that than I am, but I can say that there's so much to like about owning the power of the production, right? The ability to produce your own community's electricity, and for that electrical production to be better for your community. Like as Matt said, rising costs, that's like on everybody's mind. So can we do it in a way that's going to control our rising costs over the long term? Can we do it in a way that's going to provide reliability? Can we do it in a way that is going to produce less pollution, less air and water pollution, which Julie is absolutely right. Like people really care about that, and they should, because it's a major cause of ill health and discomfort. So I don't know that the term, frankly, to be totally honest, Matt, sustainable energy utility is the first time I'd heard those three words together. I wrote them down. I'm going to now do my homework. But whether whether that is the right term to get people in the community excited by it or not, I wouldn't know. But boy, you can certainly find out with the type of active listening that Julie recommended.
And I would say you don't have to lead with the word sustainability. There were some great suggestions in the chat. Somebody talking about control your own energy. Somebody talking about stability. Don't you want to have a predictable source of energy? You don't want to be living at the fringes, not sure where your next kilowatt is going to come from. So there's a different way you could talk about it. It depends on your audience, though. I mean, the word sustainability is still fine for lots of audiences, and you kind of have to know who they are before you say the words.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, Stephen.
I just wanted to address something that I think it goes along with the points that all of you have made. Well, that is, how do we avoid accomplishment rot? That is, once we get somebody to change, or we're on the way to convincing them to be changed, and then they lose interest, either A, because they think it's already accomplished, or B, they think somebody else is going to take care of it. I had an example in a Nebraska utility that was owned locally, and they were very good at getting it established, but not so good at maintaining it over the long haul.
That sounds like something for Matt, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think in part of my work, maybe the way that I'll answer this question, hopefully it's somewhat satisfying. I think a few things that I tend to lean on, at least when we're talking about utilities, in particular, which is my world, so I'll just pull it through that lens. Accomplishment rot is not always an issue that we're facing when we're talking about trying to improve the performance of our nation's utilities. In some respects, I wish we were facing more of that issue, because that means we'd be making some good progress with folks. One of the things that we continually do, though, is look to more performance-based approaches to try and align incentives and create metrics to sort of track and continually, keep moving that bar in a progressive and productive direction, right? So whether that's peer-to-peer comparisons or benchmarking, or continually setting targets for us to be achieving going forward, it can allow us to be resetting goals and objectives on a regular cadence, so that we're not resting on our laurels and say mission accomplished. It's really about continuous improvement mindset, right? And sort of bringing that into all that you're thinking and doing, and whether that's a utility or whether that's a municipality, whether that's a community group or individuals. I think it's about sort of adopting that this is a journey. We're on a continuous mindset. We're going to set milestones for ourselves along the way, but we're not going to hit one and feel like the road trip's over, right? We're still moving in the direction that we need to move. So that's just some insights that I would share just based on my lived experience these days.
While you're speaking, Matt, I'm not sure I understand. Stephen asked about, could we set up an SEU alongside TEP's grid? And So what would that look like? Would that be having two different utilities serving or what?
Yeah, I mean, in some respects, the Sustainable Energy Utility or SEU is a bit of a term of art at this point because there's been a few iterations of this. We see, Ann Arbor is the most recent permutation. We've seen some on, stemming from initially Delaware. Uh, Washington, D.C. has a robust iteration of this as well. So there's several examples, and so it's kind of stuck now as a term. I think the utility part throws people off because we immediately think about, oh, we've got some sort of power plant that's generating electricity and transmitting it over wires. Really, what we're talking about is sort of an alternative approach to providing services to the community. And so the origin of SEUs really was in the energy efficiency space. So this was a means of sort of financing and deploying energy efficiency measures in the community as a means of like providing those services in a way that utilities were often underwhelming in delivering for communities. And now, because technologies have advanced, that's now expanded to include other permutations and other opportunities to sort of leverage the same financing resources to extend to the community. So, energy efficiency measures in homes, in multifamily dwellings, looking at deploying distributed energy resources, which can be like rooftop solar PV, perhaps coupled with distributed battery resources. I think, if it, depending on how it's constructed, it could also be constructing kind of standalone resilience hubs. Maybe you're converting a school or a church to solar plus storage so that in a resilience event, that community can congregate there and be safe and recharge cell phones, be in contact with family, have air conditioning in a heat event, or stay warm if it's, the temperatures are dropping really late at, in the evenings. So it doesn't require wheeling, as we call it, or transmission on the existing distribution system of the incumbent utility. It sort of is a complement in working alongside that utility. Now, there are examples of sort of different permutations and flavors beyond the SEU construct where you start to get into more complicated arrangements where maybe wheeling on that system could be arranged. If I were looking right now at Tucson Electric Power and trying to really examine how do we level up the existing Tucson experience when it comes to climate resilience and affordability, I would be looking very closely at Tucson Electric Power's franchise agreement, which is expiring in April 2026 as a unique leverage point that does not come up very often. These franchise agreements, what they are, is they're often historically have been set for 20 to 25 years. I believe TEP's was 25 years long. And it's the city's grant of a franchise to that regulated monopoly in order to use city rights of way to conduct maintenance and install its poles on city rights of way, conduct maintenance without having to pull permits from the city to do work along those rights of way each and every time it needs to do so. Other communities have used these franchise agreement renewals to extract concessions and community benefits from the incumbent utility in support of climate goals, et cetera. I'm not really sure what's transpiring within Tucson and how that conversation's going. I think this community is probably aware that there was a ballot measure put forward previously to try and couple some things together and renew that franchise agreement early. That ballot measure failed. And so, I think as my understanding is that the franchise agreement will be put back to a vote in March of 2026. And so to me, this is a really important leverage point and opportunity for this community organization and others across the spectrum to really lean into both the city council and maybe even directly with representatives at TEP to try and negotiate a better path forward. And SEU may have a role or a seat at that table as folks think about like how do we do better. And I have other thoughts about the specifics of like how franchise agreements might be addressed or modified in the future, but I know that's not really the topic of discussion here, but happy to sort of connect with folks offline. Last thing I'll say, with apologies, I'm sort of out of town. I am a Tucson resident. I'm out of town at the moment, and I do need to connect with some colleagues before some discussions tomorrow here with the city of Los Angeles, who's a client of ours. So apologies to this group, but I can hang on for just a few more minutes before having to adjourn myself. But I'll pause. Yeah.
Thank you, Matt, for your wonderful presentation.
Happy to be a part of this conversation. Very much appreciate it.
I think I'm the next on with my hand up. Matt, I've been pushing for the idea that the city of Tucson could create a municipal utility separate from TEP and use that just to create the emergency response in the case of power outage. We have several hundred schools and churches and stuff that have solar system already installed, and we have several hundred water pumps that could easily provide water if they had power. Is this SEU something that might be applicable to that?
Yeah. I mean, in short, yes. I would say the SEU itself can be a means of leveraging municipal bonds or other financing mechanisms and then using those resources to deploy assets in the community, independent of the utility. It could be in close coordination with the utility, just depending on the arrangement. Now, in your example, an SEU could be designed to pool funding, usually bonds in this case, deploy strategic assets at institutions that you want to help build resilience around. And that can be part of the strategy for resilience within the community. In addition to that, there are degrees of like sophistication one can envision here. More advanced flavors of this, which we haven't seen examples of, but it's certainly within the realm of possibility, is that same entity then could really start to put in control systems and software systems in place where you start to aggregate these assets together to form what is known as a virtual power plant in our industry space. So that this is now maybe not just a resilience hub, but if there's a need on the system, this could actually be providing services to the broader grid and working in complement with TEP and really starting to reduce the costs for the community beyond those host sites for those assets as well. Now, that requires a lot more sophistication in like true interconnection of these assets with the grid. But these are all things that are technically feasible. It's just a means of sort of figuring out what the arrangements might be. So hopefully that answers the question.
My basic question, Matt, is this legal in Arizona?
It's certainly legal. It would require some establishment depending on how you want this structured. What we've seen in other jurisdictions is either it's a city chartered entity. So if it's a city chartered entity, that means it'll be a creation of city council. There may need to be a vote by the population. If it's city chartered, then you start to leverage some of the financing power of the municipality itself, right? Which there's a lot of attraction to that if you're trying to create scale and really be able to finance a larger deployment of resources in the community. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, it's like you can establish it as a 501c3. There's nothing illegal about creating an entity that's a nonprofit that's in the business of providing assets to the community. Like we can go, a church right now can go and put solar on its roof and storage on its site and make it itself very resilient. There's nothing illegal about that. Now, if a nonprofit's helping them do that, again, nothing illegal about that. It's just a matter of like, what's the degree of integration within a city quasi-public or public institution status. And ultimately what it'll come down to is how easy is it for you to build resources and funding to then leverage that and extend opportunities for your churches, schools, and other residents to deploy these assets. Other financing mechanisms that we've seen include things like PACE, which are property assessed clean energy. Now that has a little bit more complicated history in Arizona in terms of how successful it's been, but there are different pathways. The fundamentals, though, or it's absolutely legal. It's just, how much can, your footprint be, and how many resources can you marshal, and can you use the power of the municipality to issue bonds for that purpose or not?
Thank you, Stephen. I see your hands up, but I'd like to circle back first to something Stephen asked because I think Ed's been quiet for a while. How do we make it fun for TEP and the city and the Arizona Corporation Commission to cooperate with some of these ideas? You'll have to unmute.
So there's the flip side of fun, which is painful. And sometimes with a regulated utility, it might be easier to raise the specter of the pain that they will experience if they don't get on board. Here in Virginia, where Dominion Power is our premier utility in the state, and they are all powerful. They are often talked about as the single most potent political force in state politics in Virginia. But not so many years ago, I've lost track exactly, but we'll call it between 5 and 7 years ago. Suddenly, they really made a switch. They had been fighting, the sort of the whole notion of a clean energy plan, uh, tooth and nail, and all of a sudden they were decided it's just going to be easier for us to get out in front of this. I don't know what they were told in the back room, but it was clear that they were told some things that raised the specter of pain. So that's just the flip side of when you're trying to create a path to the future that you want. There's create barriers to make the current present more unpopular, more unpleasant, and remove the barriers to building that future that you want. So I don't know anything about TEP other than the fact that I have two sons who are ratepayers there, and they don't seem particularly impressed.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, thank you, Ed. Stephen Lush, you've been waiting patiently.
Well, yeah, I suggest to make it a little more fun with the Corporation Commission, you give them all a big bag of money. But um, what about I guess this is for Matt. What about the concept of a community of microgrids? Is that a way to kind of tie, say, Tucson Water and resilience and a bunch of functions together? And do we really need a former Tucson Water executive pointed out that lots of water companies used to own their own electric utilities because of the power consumption. Uh, that's kind of a blind alley, though, if you want to incorporate a broader spectrum of resilience, is it not?
Yeah, maybe just to unpack, there's a couple things in there. I think first, with the creation of like community microgrids, it depends on how the microgrid is constructed as to whether you start to invoke statewide jurisdiction of in this case, Arizona Corporation Commission. But just deploying a single customer microgrid, if that's the Tucson Water in this case, as for example, there's that absolutely can be done today. I think the question would be one of cost versus value, and sort of how Tucson Water and would evaluate that as alongside the community, obviously as a public water utility. So nothing stopping anyone from pursuing those types of technologies to being deployed right now. Now, when you start to think about multi-customer microgrids, where now you're creating a microgrid that has different customers within it, that starts to bleed into some gray areas where now there's a question of like, well, are you operating as a utility, right? Now you're serving multiple customers. Do we need to regulate you as a utility, and do you get to do that within another regulated entity's service territory? So there's some complications there legally. But just creating a single customer microgrid, that happens all over the country, and it's just a matter of sort of cost to value. There's other ways to sort of provide backup generation and resources to the water utility. And in fact, I don't know this for certain, but I'm almost positive they have some forms of backup generation, I'm sure, just to kind of keep some of their operation continuity in place. should the broader grid fail them. But there's certainly room for those types of activities today, just to answer that question.
Let me slip in one more question here. For like a 501(c)(3) or a nonprofit, would it be possible for them to solicit public funds, investments from?
So yeah, that's a great question. I would think so. I wouldn't see any reason why they wouldn't be able to accept public funds. I think there's, other funding sources. So, just as C3s accept public funding now for other purposes, this could certainly accept public funding. There's been, there's even been contemplation of sort of a line item on the utility bill itself that ratepayers would pay that then feeds into a funding pool that entity could utilize and deploy in a community. So there's different ways to sort of source the financing, but certainly public funding could be one of them. Yeah.
Thank you.
So,
Stephen, let me jump in because we're getting close on time now.
okay, sure.
Bruce Blank had a comment, I think, on that
Yeah,
question. I'd just like to, for a moment, I'd like to acknowledge Jess. Jess, you talked about how the students they want to do something. So this conversation is your students now in their older incarnations who want to do something also. And these questions are very much focused on that. So Bruce, and then I think would be Trace or Paula.
So a quick question for you, Matt. A number of us have been working on strategizing regarding the TEP franchise agreement. I'm wondering if you would be willing to sit down with some of us at some point and give us your thoughts on that. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, that is a possibility. Absolutely, Bruce. Happy to share my contact info, and I've gathered a few thoughts. I just given my other obligations, haven't been able to spend too much time reaching out to others, but I'd love to chat with you, Bruce. Yeah,
that'd be great. We'll track you down.
Good, cool. And with that, I'm sorry, I do have to disappear, guys. Thank you so much for the conversation.
Thank you again, Matt.
Continuing it. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks again, Matt.
Take care.
And thanks again, Stephen Lush. I hate to just cut in, but we can stick around if you want for a minute if there's more follow-up to do. I think it was, let's see, Bruce spoke and then Paula.
Unmute. There you go.
Okay, yeah, this is going to take us in a very different sort of direction. I wanted to get back to what Jess was saying about her students and what they really want to do and how they want to get involved. And maybe Ed also, because you've been working with somewhat older students, but might also have some thoughts. What you were saying, I think the students could tie very easily into both of the 3-point pillars that Ed was describing. What I was wondering is the extent to which they want to be told what they could do, told what the solutions are, told how to get involved, taught about all of these things, or do they want to go out and do the research and maybe be creative and even entrepreneurial in their own right? It would be wonderful to get them involved in actually out doing things that all of us older folks could learn from, and they can take the lead in many ways. Is that what they're looking for, or is it more, we want to do something, tell us what to do or how to do it?
It's a little bit of both, because I think, going back to some of the points that were already made as well, like how much, when we think about like that modeling, right? So they need a little bit of both. So like some of them are very hesitant to be told what to do at all in any capacity, as you might imagine, teenagers, right? But while others are like, I don't know how to get started. But that's where, when I was speaking with one class in particular, they all talked about like some of their favorite class activities are where they are, given some data, given some information, and then they go out and they do a thing like immediately, and then they are then asked, like, now what? Right? So that they've had that opportunity to have a model of like what is something that's already being done, like what's a solution that already exists to help get them started, and then be able to take it and run with it and come up with new creative things.
I think that question, now what, is a really great one to be asking them on a regular basis.
Yes.
Yeah, great. Ed, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. High school students can't vote, but as Brianna pointed out in the chat, they can be a powerful force for political change. In some respects, they're anti-authorities. They aren't yet like fully credentialed human beings, but they've got the authority of this is their future. We're messing up by not taking sufficient action. So, I would love to see Tucson's high school students become a real political voice to demand the kinds of changes, systemic changes, policy changes, economic changes that will really make a difference in Tucson. Think of Greta Thunberg. I'm sure we all know who she was, the Swedish teenager who sat out in front of Parliament with her little sign and ended up igniting an entire youth movement around, worldwide. We have done research here in the US which showed that American adults, there was a positive correlation between how aware American adults were of who Greta is and how much they believe in our collective capability to force the policymakers to do the right thing. This one, I don't want to call her autistic. This one kid clearly on the spectrum, in Sweden is what she is doing is so powerful that it inspired lots of American adults to believe more in themselves and people like them to create systemic change. To me, that is just revolutionary. And everything Jessica said just brought a smile to my face. I love the fact that you got this out of them with so little prompting, and it's so inspiring what they said.
Yeah, that was wonderful.
Ed, if I might respond, I haven't shared this with people, but I'm delighted you brought up Greta Thunberg. She is the one. I used to fly 80 to 100,000 miles a year around the world constantly. She's the one that brought me down to fewer than 5,000 miles in the last 5 years because I paid attention to Greta Thunberg. So spot on comment, and kudos to her and everyone here. So thank you.
Yeah, and thanks, Brianna, for a nice distinction in your comment in the chat. Clarity on the problem brings clarity to the solution, she wrote. It's not, quote, human caused, it's, quote, fossil fueled. And how interesting that for certain audiences, that can be just what we need to be saying and hearing. We're at 7:20 now, and I wonder if this would be a good time for us to start to wrap up. It sure is exciting hearing all these voices and seeing all the things. Jan has just put something into the chat, which I hope you all can read. The Water Committee is doing a really super job of getting speakers like the ones we just had tonight to come to their Water Committee meetings, to open the meeting within 30, 40 minutes of information about what our situation is here. And then the rest of the meeting is about what are we going to do? And so you see those, and there's Environmental Day at the Capitol, Wednesday, the 11th of February. Dwayne is gone, Jan has gone. Anyone else here has gone yet to that? Let's see.
I would like to comment about this. So the Water Committee is having different topics on water at the last Monday of every month. And the next one will be on how to talk to your legislature, which will be useful if you're going to Environmental Day at the Capitol. But you can sign up for Environmental Day using that link. And if you would like to get a link to all of these Water Committee meetings, just email me at jana@sustainabletucson.org.
Thank you, Jana. We love the Water Committee and all the things that you've been doing. Okay. Well, while we're at pausing, I think I'll make an announcement. I think Paul actually mentioned the ambassadors of sustainability, very interested in the kinds of things that Ed was talking about this evening, and Julie, and and Jessica. We actually, excuse me a second, we have 5 scholarships, stipend scholarships for high school or college students who'd like to do the entire program. And it has a small stipend to go along with it for their successful completion of the program. So if any of you have students that you'd like to recommend to the program, you can certainly write to stewart@sustainabletucson.org. And for the rest of you, we encourage you to join us. It's really fun. Stephen Menke is one of the presenters. Bruce Plank will be this year also. And we've got some former ambassadors now presenting to the ambassadors program on things like water and eating well for the planet and sustainable and affordable housing.